Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. I just want to place a little nugget here before we get into the great conversation about the calorie in, calorie out model, the hormonal model of fat loss and weight loss. If you're looking to accelerate your results and truly understand the why behind you do what you do when it comes to your fasting and weight loss efforts, I want to encourage you, head to the show notes, click the link for the next upcoming challenge coming up on the 22nd. We will be with you live 7 days in a row. Replays are up immediately after the lives if you're not able to join. We've got all of the resources, links. You've got text messaging with us so we can coach you through the week. And if you're looking to just accelerate your results and once and for all get off that fasting, dieting roller coaster, then this is for you. So head to the show notes, click the link, and we'll see you on the inside. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We're going to be going over an article that was just released late last year in the BMC Journal of Geriatrics, and it's the effects of 15-9. So I call that intermittent fasting light. 15-9 time-restricted eating on cognitive function and anthropometric parameters among the elderly with mild cognitive impairment. Ooh. An assessor-blinded pilot randomized controlled trial, which is what we love. So that was a lot of words. How does this apply to you? Well, at the root of type 3 diabetes and dementia and Alzheimer's is blood sugar and insulin balance. So how do we best tap into that? Through a fasting for life lifestyle. So if you are new to the podcast, welcome in. If you want to know more about Tommy and myself and our journeys and how fasting has transformed our lives, which has led to us doing this weekly podcast episode and resources on the website and challenges and coaching, head back, give it a listen. It'll give you a little bit of insight into who we are and how we roll. If you are a long-term listener, shout out. Thank you so much for the likes, shares, rates, reviews, subscribes, 5-star reviews, which we are so blessed and grateful to have so many. Yeah, and that just keeps us going and gives us gratitude that, we really are, helping people and moving the needle. So today's conversation is going to be great. We're going to apply it to the prevention category as well. So how do we pull the small levers in our day-to-day adoption of a fasting lifestyle to get long-term benefit? Not just about the number on the scale or the size of your waist, but truly the benefit that we see. So really cool study. But first, a shout out to Carl in Wisconsin, Tommy. He leaves us a 5-star review. Actions I have taken, !
Thank you, Carl, for the 5-star review. He said, I found the podcast in late November, started listening to you guys on my 50-minute commute, so 3 to 4 episodes every single day, just absorbing it. I started at episode 1, and I quit dabbling and really focused in January when I was weaning off of my GLP. I'm up to early fall 2023 and waiting for any comments on GLPs. You'll find some in there. And I'm down a total of 90 pounds. Congratulations, Carl. That's incredible. -9 in December, -21 in January, -8 in February. Thank you for helping me to open up my eyes. Looking forward to warm weather to get outside and ramp up that movement. And any advice is I bicycle many miles while I fast. So high intensity, how to manage OMADs with workouts like that. And Scott, we addressed that on a recent Q&A, right?
Yeah, we did an episode. So shout out again, Carl. Keep up the great work. Thank you for leaving us the review. Episode 307, we talked about it with hobby endurance runners and marathon training, etc. And I'll just tell you this as a foreshadow. Go back, listen to episode 307. Let us know if you got questions. But the biggest thing is going to be managing your hydration and becoming fat adapted. And we talk a lot about that. So excited for you to get outside and enjoy the warm weather. It's already ramping up here in Houston. Summer is on the cusp. So excited for you to be able to get out and get those miles in. And congrats again on just the amazing work so far.
So great.
And thank you for leaving that review. It's going to help a ton of other people as well. So let's get into today's article. Tommy, the effects of 15-9 time-restricted eating, anytime you see TRE, just think intermittent fasting, on cognitive function in anthropometric parameters. So we're talking waist circumference, BMI, scale, etc., among the elderly with mild cognitive impairment, right? And it's a assessor-blind pilot randomized controlled trial. So why does this matter? Why does this apply to you if you're not in this category? We always like to say, and if you've been around with us long enough, you'll hear us say, we like to begin with the end in mind, right? We want to adopt a fasting lifestyle that helps us get the weight off, get our labs in check, regain our energy, show up better as husbands and wives and dads and moms and grandparents, right? To just increase that quality of life. Because what we know now, which is clear, is that when you look at the plaque model of dementia and Alzheimer's, that's not a proven theory. And typically it's a watch and wait method, right? You see the early signs, sometimes they're missed, sometimes they're not. And why this matters to all of us, as we like to call the general population, is we now know that there is, and in some of the literature, diabetes is referenced as type 3 diabetes is referenced as dementia and Alzheimer's. There is a metabolic component, a blood sugar regulatory, insulin regulatory metabolic component to this condition. And now these numbers, if you look at the chronic state of health in the US, we have chronic lifestyle disease, heart disease, cancers, diabetes, all rising at rates that don't match the amount of medical intervention and medications that we have. There's lots of things like the obesogenic food environment, ultra-refined processed foods, but the reality is it comes down to the behaviors and kind of being able to identify what are the biggest levers that you can pull to either slow down the process, reverse the process, or prevent it, which is the bucket that we want to spend most of our time in.
Yeah.
So Tommy, the reason why I started here is because we all know, especially in my family, someone that has dementia, Alzheimer's, grandparents, aunts, uncles, the baby boomer generation.
Yep.
It is a real thing that we're seeing as one of the quietly rising epidemics in chronic lifestyle health, which lead to all-cause mortality and just a massive decrease, if you've dealt with this like we have in our family, just a massive decrease in quality of life, which then puts the pressure on you and the younger generation as the kids or the aunts, uncles, relatives to then support and care for those individuals. And it's really freaking tough.
It's so tough. And it only makes it tougher when the cognitive decline is accelerating, or if it's advanced beyond where it's
reached a cliff.
Yeah, for sure. Because there definitely are cliffs where there's these step down moments that happen in function, and those things are real. And obviously, aging is a real thing. We can't just we can't just stop the aging process. But what we want to do here,
there's some billionaire biohackers that are trying.
It's very true. But
there's one inevitability, right? We all have that.
And so what we'd really like to see is the fact that, okay, so our brain and our nervous system tissue is the most active tissue in our body. So our brain is responsible metabolically for much more proportionally than the weight of the actual tissue itself.
It uses up to 25% of the daily energy requirements, just the brain.
Right, which is just crazy. And so then what that really means is that metabolically speaking, our brain is like the canary in the coal mine for an issue going on. And so if we can take the fact that there are cognitive issues or decline, especially in the earlier stages, we can do something about them. We can also help to prevent them so that these things aren't accelerating at a rate that's faster than the decline of our body, because that's what really leads to the mismatch that hits us really hard as far as quality of life goes. When we have somebody, like maybe it's a parent or it's a grandparent or it's ourselves, at some point where our brain is basically is on the decline much faster than our body is, and so we can actually slow that process down, and it starts here. And so that's where the great thing is, where we can intervene with a small lever that has a large output, meaning that we can really leverage some small things here that are going to substantially help with these signs of earlier cognitive decline, right?
Yeah, so if you're in your 40s to 70s, worried about your memory, you walk into the room, you forget what you're doing, you're not as productive at work. I know for me, I love my 24-hour fast on Sundays because my Mondays are busy, and I like to have my brain firing, that BDNF firing on all cylinders.
Exactly.
So really, we're going to connect the time-restricted eating or fasting to metabolic health, to brain health, right? It's a small sample, it's a pilot design study, but there's promising things in this study that we're going to apply to the general population in terms of prevention, right? So here's kind of an opening thought for you guys to hear as then we break down we'll get into the metrics of the study, what the outcomes were, and then ultimately how we're going to apply this to a fasting lifestyle, is what if simply closing your kitchen at 5 p.m. could move the needle on your memory in your 70s? Right? Like, wow.
Powerful.
Like, what is that? An ounce of, I'm terrible at paraphrasing, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Absolutely, at least.
Right? So, and Tommy, I know you have a personal a story with this, with a loved one where you noticed the food-related behaviors and the mood changes and things that happened. I've seen it in 3 out of my 4 grandparents who are no longer with us, that they're a completely different person, right? The anger, the behavior, the switching on and off of the light switch. And we hear this from our coaching clients often, is that a lot of them are now caring for their loved ones, right? Now, we're not going to talk, this study doesn't talk about those advanced stages, even though I truly believe that there are still things that can be done to improve the quality of life of an individual. But mild cognitive impairment that was looked at in this study is kind of the yellow light between normal aging and dementia, and is often reversible or modifiable. So we're going to walk through the trial with this time-restricted eating, this fasting lever, in older adults with this MCI, this mild cognitive impairment, and then translate it into what this could mean for your fasting schedule, your parents, and your future brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we get up into this patient population, oftentimes what we see is a combination of lifestyle factors that then at some point tends to accelerate these processes.
I'd say lifestyle behaviors too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a psychological aspect, there's a cognitive and a neurological aspect that are in place here, but the root of them is a metabolic aspect, and between hunger hormones, satiety or lack of satiety, cravings, sugar cravings, just being very sugar dependent and carbohydrate dependent,
convenient obesogenic foods.
Yeah, like think snacks and candies and things like that. And when somebody gets more and more reliant on these things, then that tends to become hyper palatable foods tend to become like one of the only things that they want and that they crave.
Yeah.
And then that only just further accelerates
gasoline
this
on the
process
fire.
right here. It is. And so with my wife's grandmother specifically, in her last few years, we saw this process that really started to accelerate. And I wish I would have seen the results of this study, because taking some small levers and some small interventions to kind of change the environment just a little bit could be really, really helpful, where somebody has access to certain foods, and that tends to be just the easier, more hyper palatable, hyper processed ones. But then this is metabolically creating this feedback loop that only kind of self perpetuates it. More sugar requires more sugar, and then that's kind of it. But all the while, the brain, the BDNF, the brain-derived neurotropic factor, is very low. Ketones are low, and metabolism is essentially just very, very hyper dependent on sugar, which is also deleterious for the brain and accelerates these cognitive decline issues.
Yeah, let's break the study down, and then we'll get into some of the real life action steps for all of us.
Okay.
Just starting with that framework of when we look at, could your lifestyle now, right, could simply moving your TRE, your fasting window earlier in the day, affect your brain of the future, right? So this was 46 community dwelling older adults in China. So Tommy mentioned them going to the cafeteria to get their meals. The average age was 74, all with clinically diagnosed MCI, so mild cognitive impairment, mostly overweight. They excluded dementia, stroke, diabetes, malnutrition, sarcopenia, depression. So the group is fairly healthy, but cognitively at risk. And what they did, there was a randomized 1-to-1 distribution. So there was a group that was in the 15-9 TRE, which is that 15 hours of fasting, 9 hours nutrition window, right? Versus the control group, which was keep doing what you're doing, ad libitum schedule. It was a 12-week study. The TRE group was able to eat from 8 to 5. Now, I'll pause here because we've changed our tune on this in terms of our fasting window rather than the standard when we ask the question, hey, if you had to pick one meal a day, what meal would you pick? 80 to 90% of people would pick dinner.
Right.
But we've shifted, and we'll talk about some of the mechanisms and circadian alignment here for the potential of that improvement to getting your meals in earlier in the day when your insulin sensitivity is higher. Your body's ability to process that energy and tap into fat stores is better earlier in the day. So I love that this window was 8 to 5, and then water only for the rest of the evening, and then a 9-hour fast. The control group was standard meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, right? And all meals were provided by the center to minimize differences in what they ate. Only the timing differed on paper.
Okay.
What did they measure? Well, for brain function, they measured the primary was the Montreal Cognitive Assessment called the MoCA, and the AVLT, which is the Auditory Verbal Learning Test. That's the neuropsychological assessment tool. And the MoCA is something that I have some experience with. So I'm with a group called Brain Restore Centers. And one of the main categories of folks that we help is the neurodegenerative category, which is dementia, brain fog, memory issues, Alzheimer's, those types of folks. The other group is post-concussive or TBI. But in that, we use the MoCA as an initial part of the network interference assessment, which is the initial assessment on your attention and memory and recall. And then the verbal learning recognition test, I had to go look this one up, which is the AVLT. And they did this at 0, 6, and 12 weeks. And we do the same thing at 0, 45 days, and 90 days inside of the Brain Restore Centers, right? It's a really powerful test. I've been through it. The staff's certified in it and how to administer it and interpret the results. It's really cool to see the changes when you make lifestyle changes that then result in better brain function, which we know is the master control of the entire system. The secondary measurements were body weight, BMI, waist circumference, calf circumference, and adherence. So we love the adherence category. But here's what changed. So when we looked at the outcomes of the study, there were 23 in each group. Average age was 74, mostly female. BMI was in that 25, so slightly just tick up into the overweight category. The MoCA changed 1.7 units or score on that exam, and that's a big change, almost 2 points higher. That's a big change when we're talking about a short intervention with only one small lever pulled, which was a 9-hour eating opportunity.
Yeah.
The AVLT changed by 2.5 points. And the adherence was 87%, which when you adopt a fasting lifestyle, if you're making that 80% rule, right, like we like to say, progress over perfection, we love to see adherence above that 80% because then you're truly moving the needle from a metabolic and a scale standpoint. But interestingly enough, in this study, Tommy, there was a 2% decrease in weight change in the time-restricted eating group, which is not statistically significant, right? They were trying to have them meet the 5% mark. So the scale didn't move, but the brain improved. And that is incredibly powerful when we've talked a lot about this year about a foundational fasting lifestyle. It's not, oh, I'm fasting one day and I'm off my plan and not fasting the next day. No, it's consistent fasting. Your fasting floor, your fasting foundation, whatever we named it. I can't remember. I think it was episode 311, right? You are a faster, right? So that floor, yeah, the scale didn't move, but your brain improved. And that's incredibly powerful.
The scale is such a, like, the shiny object that brings most of us over to fasting. I still love the fact that
that's what we talk about, right?
Right. I still love the fact that the way that the arrow moved in this study was slightly down for the fasting group and then slightly up for the non-fasting group. So if we saw this in a giant study, it might actually, be more statistically significant. But I don't even, like you said, I don't even really care about that, because the protection for the brain and the ability to actually move the needle there in these cognitive windows with these cognitive tests is incredible. And this is one of the first studies of its kind that actually looked at these cognitive outcome measures as a primary measure, with TRE being the variable here. And
the only variable, because they were eating cafeteria food,
right.
And we couldn't find what food was served, but I guarantee that it was standard American. It wasn't protein paste. It wasn't the Mediterranean diet, right, which is healthy fats, which has been shown to have incredible effects on brain health and longevity.
Of course.
Right. So it was this what we've been accustomed to, which is this daily fasting lifestyle. Now, if you're new to fasting, it seems like a big stretch, but if you've been fasting, that's a small lever. Doing a 15-hour fast when you have a fasting lifestyle isn't a big lift.
Yeah, absolutely. This kind of diet, if you want to call it that, this kind of food supply is typically around 10 to 15% protein by calorie. Okay, right? And that's part of what, if we were designing our own study, we would do it a bit differently, right? We could change some of these other variables and further optimize the results for it. But even without having to take action and intervene on all of these different things, just keeping it very simple, a 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. eating window, and being able to see these improvements. I mean, this is really, really, really substantial. And this is something that we could help our parents, we could help our grandparents with, as they need us to kind of step in and help them with some of their boundaries and some of their lifestyle. Like you might be responsible for getting some of the groceries, or for helping prepare the meals, or for asking.
Yeah, if you're caring for someone, yeah.
Or if somebody is, if there's hired assistants, helping them with meal preparation or with mealtime, you can ask them to shift the schedule a little bit. So you can make some natural changes that help steer somebody in this direction, knowing confidently that it's going to be helpful in the long run and the short run too, because some of these cognitive effects were seen in as early as 6 weeks. And then others showed up around the 12-week mark. And so which would be really, really nice to see an even longer term study. Did they persist? Did these effects accelerate? Were other potential cognitive markers seen as time went on and as the intervention stuck with them?
So the mechanisms that move the needle here, and the message really is that timing is the distinct therapeutic lever in this pilot RCT.
Exactly.
There are limitations, right? Small sample size, cafeteria food, we get it, right? That's not a real world application. But the message that timing is the distinct therapeutic lever, separate from the calories or the macros. Mm-hmm. We can talk about all that, but why do we need to optimize before we standardize? We need to standardize first.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I love about this study. So some of the mechanisms or the buckets of why the needle was moved in this way is the circadian rhythm alignment, right? I mentioned this earlier, the earlier feeding, the longer overnight fast. Right? It's not the calorie that's going to get you if you eat late at night. It's going to be the sleep and circadian disruption that's going to get you, right? Yeah. Improved insulin signaling and reduced glycemic variability. So the earlier you eat in the day, the better your insulin responds. You're less insulin sensitive as the day goes on, as the night approaches, right? So that earlier meal. Reduce neuroinflammation and oxidative stress. We know there's an inflammatory component to metabolic issues and to cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's, dementia. You've got increased autophagy and mitochondrial efficiency. Your brain is literally, neuroplasticity-wise, it is functioning at a higher level. And that's related to the gut-brain axis changes with the compressed feeding times and that promotion of that brain-derived neurotrophic factor that we see. By the way, exercise can also give you BDNF spikes or improvements. And so can simple calorie restriction when it relates to autophagy. It can actually allow your body to heal and get rid of the bad non-functioning cells and create new ones. But fasting hits all of those buckets at once. So again, the message here is the timing is the main therapeutic lever, which is why we love this study.
Yeah. What if we zoom out too for a second here? Because if you know anybody who's in this age range, and especially in the early cognitive impairment kind of situation or scenario, then what you may also notice is a decrease motivation for taking care of themselves sometimes.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that it seems like that kind of executive function, it declines over time as well with cognitive impairment. And so if we can look at this as kind of a cycle of brain functioning decline leads to also decreased executive function, which then leads to not really caring about choices so much and being more driven from, like moment to moment, almost, very, very carbohydrate or sugary, kind of temptations and cravings and things like that. And that can kind of that can kind of get into all, hours of the day potentially. But with compartmentalizing some of this in a very doable way, what we can do is we can increase cognitive function, which then could potentially lead to better executive function, which could lead to wanting to and having more motivation to actually take care of and the ability to make better overall decisions and kind of see things in more of that big picture way that we lose sight of with less cognitive function. And so you don't have to be in your 80s or your 70s to really kind of benefit from that as we age. And as we see our own cognition like not firing as efficiently or not feeling as sharp as we used to, we can
the dreaded insulin coma, the brain fog, right?
Exactly. I mean, you could feel this on a short-term basis, and we could get a hold of it. We can have a positive effect on it on the short-term basis. That's also going to have a really great positive effect in the long term as well. And so this is just to really reiterate what you said, Scott. A reason to have your foundational, your floor fasting as your lifestyle. Why would I want to do this every day, especially if I have weight to lose, but it doesn't feel like things are really moving? I'm not seeing the scale move. I still have this weight that I want to lose. So what? Let me just be patient with that part of the process. Let me look at this with a separate eye towards, I need this. I need this for brain protection, for brain function, brain optimization. So I'm going to do this in a 15, 16 hour way that I can do every day without just letting that go to zero. I don't ever want to let that go to zero. Like I'm fasting today because I'm a faster, right?
Yep. So let's go through the overall levers that we can pull based off of the study. So the fasting focus levers. If you are caring for a loved one, an elderly friendly plan is to really just move that, just like the study did, is move their dinner earlier. Maybe this is why the early bird specials are out there. If you lived in Florida like I did, the dinner rush starts at 4. Maybe that's an inherent innate circadian drive to eat earlier. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But it's kind of funny to think about.
Yeah.
So an earlier window, right? So prioritizing that early TRE. Now this goes for everybody, right? Because we've changed our tune on this over the years. So front loading the calories, finishing dinner earlier, getting most of your energy and fuel in earlier in that day. If you are helping a loved one or you yourself need some help in this to stay more consistent, start with a window that you can hit and slowly increase week over week. So just start expanding that fasting window and then anchor your fasting efforts and your nutrition window to protein and weight resistance exercise. Because protein targets, and even if it's just walking or walking in the pool or a weighted vest or a simple 2 to 3 days a week of some resistance bands, right? You don't need to hire the personal trainer and make it more complicated. We just need to hit a bunch of singles. So, but making sure that we're focusing on TRE, your nutrition window on protein and that metabolic powerhouse, which is those muscle cells. That's going to help you manage that blood sugar and insulin much more efficiently. So moderate exercise, ideally, randomized controlled trials. We talk about this 3 times a week, moderate activity improves global cognition, memory, and blood sugar management. When you're talking about nutritional levers you can pull, the Mind or Mediterranean style diet is incredibly clear in the research. It is associated with slower cognitive decline and, in my opinion, a lever that you can easily pull or adapt to prevent any of this risk ever coming up and you becoming your aunt or uncle or grandma or someone that you've cared for in this vein. That's empowering, right? Yeah. The next one is lifestyle is sleep. Short sleep, 5 to 6 hours, is directly associated with higher brain deterioration, neurodegenerative issues, dementia risk. So really trying to focus on increasing or protecting your quality sleep between 7 to 8 hours. When you combine that with the earlier eating cutoff, that's going to amplify your fasting, your TRE, and circadian efforts and allow you to function better and feel that BDNF on that next day. And then we got to keep our brains active.
Yep.
Right? We need to be active. We have an aunt and uncle here. We helped them sell their house. My aunt has some dementia, early onset dementia signs, and she's stable now. We sold their house, got them into a great apartment complex where they have activities and they have trips and they have trails and bingo and morning breakfast. And I know it seems silly to say, but like they're happier now than they ever were when they were living in that house on an island by themselves.
Yeah, we're such social creatures.
Yeah. So if you are not in that active adult community or in this study, like in the China study, right, you're going to the cafeteria for your meals, we still need that social connection and that social interaction. I personally struggle with this as a husband and dad and business owner. Like, my wife's always like, what are you going to do for you this week? I'm like, take care of everybody. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm just going to go work, right? She's like, no, you go play golf. Go to the Kingdom Men event at church. Go just be around people and like talk, right? And I'm like, I'm fine.
Fill your buckets too, right?
Yeah, fill your buckets, right? So it's not only just about the fasting, it's about the lifestyle. And that's why I really love this. And I to your point, Tommy, I wish I would have known some of this stuff before. And now being in the brain restore, neurodegenerative, functional neurology space, I'm getting to see this really come to life with people, and it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I love the fact that you highlighted you can take early action on this, whether you're listening to this and you're in your 30s or your 40s or your 50s. Like it could be way before any of this is even a factor for you, and it can just help to justify and to fuel your decision to be a fasting lifestyler, where this is part of my self-image, this is part of my non-negotiable, that I'm going to use these windows even when they don't feel like very fat burning aggressive. I'm going to use them for like my foundational health, because your brain health is at the foundation of your quality of life and your longevity. So let's optimize it as quickly as possible, and let's pull that protein lever. Let's get more used to even the fact that if you've been dieting for a long period of time, let's acknowledge the fact that sometimes we get used to having a smaller plate. We get used to cutting down on our portion sizes somewhat, and oftentimes that hits our protein number. And then at the same time, that allows more room and more access and more craveability to get something to satiate my hunger, which tends to be more carbohydrates. And so let's flip that balance so we get used to that at our earlier ages, and we can continue on with that as part of our lifestyle and part of our habits, our eating habits, even in our older ages.
And I'll just say once again, the fact that the anthropometrics didn't change a lot, right, in terms of the clinical outcomes, but they were moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
But simply the timing, the TRE was the thing that drove the outcomes. And it's so incredible. So really to wrap up, aligning an earlier consistent eating window with movement, quality sleep, and a brain supportive diet, Mediterranean, healthy protein, healthy fat, gives TRE, gives your fasting lifestyle, your fasting efforts, its best shot at not just improving your metabolic health in your labs and your waistline, but also protecting long-term brain health and cognitive function, Tommy. So love the conversation.
Yeah,
love the action steps, man. Appreciate it as always. And we will talk soon.
Thank you. Bye. So you've heard today's episode and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life. While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.